Hi, I'm Greg Jeffers, and this is the Flyoverland podcast. I wanted to share with you some of the better portions of the recent interview with, or by Chris Williams of Eric Weinstein. Weinstein is one of the world's top minds. He's a PhD in mathematics and a visiting fellow at Oxford and was with Harvard for many, many years. And well, he sets everyone on fire fearlessly. Now, it's a 3-hour interview. Most people aren't going to take the time to wade through that. So I'll show you some of the better clips and have some commentary on them.
Right now, the main institutions of our society have abdicated their role for public spirited adjudication of what is true based on expertise. And so what you're seeing is people coming to hate experts and coming to hate institutions because they're realizing that these institutions lie to them at a level that they've never considered unless they were Alex Jones fans to begin with. And so what you're having a large number of people waking up to the idea that, yeah, there really are organizations and working groups that determine what you hear from a multiplicity of venues. It's the same message relentlessly.
What Dr. Weinstein is referring to here is the use of inculcation, right? To inculcate. The use of inculcation, repetitive messaging to convince people of the legitimacy of a very illegitimate idea. This was something that Goebbels had perfected in the Nazi regime, but in Mein Kampf, Hitler has a passage where he shreds the propagandists from World War I, from the Weimar Republic and from the Kaiser in World War I, just shreds them and praises England's and later America's wonderful use of propaganda. It's hardly something that an endorsement that one would seek, but there it is. Anyway, so Eric is referring here to the use of inculcation where we repeat things over and over and over. And the only way that that is possible is with the cooperation of the people who control the media.
Unfortunately, some members of the media
use their platforms to push their own personal bias. And agenda to control exactly what people think. This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
I think Sam is discounting the idea that once people wake up to the concept that they were living in an orchestrated Truman Show that they did not understand, they're not going to have the idea of like, oh, sure, the vaccines were a little bit more dangerous than claimed and maybe a little bit less effective and maybe we knew a little bit more about the lab leaks. Like, no way. You spat directly in my face and told me not only that it was raining, but that I was a crazy person for thinking that you spat directly in my face, and you piled up how many Nobel laureates to defend the idea that any inquiry into the origin of this virus was racism. It's like, you're dead to me. And I think that that's what people are not understanding in the Democratic Party. Increasingly, the basic attitude is whoever this class of people is that crawled into our elite institutions is just dead. Like, there's nothing Anthony Fauci could say at this moment that I want to hear. It's not that I don't think that he doesn't know virology or epidemiology. I know I can't trust him because of the way in which he looked into my eyes. And then, when Stephen Colbert is dancing with syringes singing the vaccine song, and Ariana Grande, is in a super highly produced number from like Hairspray, but converted to vaccines, with a giant picture of Anthony Fauci and everybody's celebrating like it's a May Day celebration. I get it. I live in a completely fake world. And I wrote an article about this in 2011 on kayfabe, which is the system of lies that undergirds professional wrestling. So now you've woken up to the idea that you've spent your life watching something like Major League Baseball or Premier League Soccer or whatever it is, and it's all fake. And now you don't know who you are. You don't know what your country is. You don't know what a ballot box is. You have no idea what news is or media. You don't know what a university is actually teaching. You've got people running around who are calling themselves scholars, who publish in scholarly journals and sit in scholarly seats, and you can tell what they're saying is completely wrong and it's directly in their area of expertise.
And so in case you missed it, that was Dr. Weinstein calling out all the administrations of the top research universities, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Stanford, pretty much everybody except for perhaps the University of Chicago and Ohio State, and defined them as debauched and pathologically unworthy of their positions. It's a brutal, brutal assessment. One of my assertions here is that we have a great number of people, a large percentage of the population, that has been so atomized and alienated that they have emotionally invested in supporting these extremely dangerous and evil people. And I don't know how we're going to unwind that. And matter of fact, I don't think we can unwind it, which is one of the reasons that I advocate for separation, for forming communities away from such people. Those people are not going to have children anyway, so they're going to die out, and you're not going to convince somebody who has spent 10 or 20 years of their adult life emotionally investing in insanity. You're not going to convince them of anything. I think the quote goes, never argue with stupid people. They will drag you down to their level and then beat you with experience.
You can't have these dangerous people running around. That's why all of us are discredited. Maybe you haven't noticed this. But like Jordan Peterson is discredited, Sam Harris is discredited, Joe Rogan is discredited, Brett Weinstein is discredited, Ben Shapiro is discredited, Barry Weiss is discredited. Everybody is discredited.
Some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias, and agenda to control exactly what people think. This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
My point is, this personal destruction is the coin of the realm. And some of the personal destruction that you see that looks organic is orchestrated as well. And we're just in this thing where, in my opinion, what you're looking at is something called deconfliction, but people don't know what that is. Deconfliction is supposed to stop what are called blue-on-blue incidences. So a blue-on-blue incidence is you have two branches of government that don't know that they're operating covertly. So maybe you have an investigative team and an undercover team, and the investigative team is about to blow the cover thinking that they've got a target, but is actually an undercover agent. So what they're supposed to do is they're supposed to check in with these centralized systems and say, do you have any assets in this arena we're about to move? Yes, we do. Oh, okay. So they find out, and this is supposed to stop blue on blue. The interesting thing is, even though there are three systems called Safety Net, RIS Safe, and Case Explorer, you can't use them unless you are an official part of the government. So I called up one of them, had a half-an-hour conversation before I started asking about Jeffrey Epstein, and then they immediately said, this call will be terminated in 5 seconds. Maybe it was Case Explorer for South Florida, something like that. What happens when you have a civilian that's not signed up for non-disclosure under no rules? You're an American citizen with full right to free speech, and you stumble on something that you're not supposed to know about. That is a deconfliction problem that nobody has ever solved. So the first thing I'd like to throw out is, if we have three separate systems to keep like the intelligence community and local police departments from tripping over each other, what do you think we do when ordinary citizens get wind of something amiss that's some super secret operation? And my claim is we discredit them.
And it's not just the mainstream media that does the discrediting. The certain political classes here have an army of deeply disturbed people who are emotionally invested in insanity and who are willing to strip the very skin off of living people that they disagree with. And the powers that be turn this army of walking dead loose upon innocent people who may have stumbled on something that the national narrative or the political narrative people don't want discussed.
We pre-bunk them in the language of the GEC, I believe. You see, we're all familiar with debunking misinformation and disinformation. You've got some disinformation that's spread it around, and we debunk it by giving you the truth. What happens when somebody is spreading the truth in a way that is unhelpful to a statecraft level narrative? Well, we didn't know what the words were, but we just found out, and it's you pre-bunk the malinformation.
Now, here is where the Bernaysian propaganda people come in. They motivate the army of, it's an unkind term, but the army of useful idiots to go forth and disturb the conversation of intelligent people so that we can't examine anything. We'll sit there and we'll demand your sources as if people are not capable of interpreting their environment correctly through nothing more than the introspection, than the evidence of their own introspection. In other words, everyone is too stupid except for the experts. And as we heard earlier, our experts are corrupted. So how do we get from here to there? What was it that Bertrand Russell said? He said, you can always find an expert who will agree with you. So an appeal to authority is a fallacy.
Now, if you didn't grow up knowing what malinformation is, here's a quick refresher. Malinformation is actual information, but it's harmful.
Right. The equivalent of politically incorrect incarnation.
Well, or, you're trying to make sure that there's support for the war in Ukraine, and somebody actually realizes that things are much more desperate than they thought. Well, that would be deleterious to our efforts if the objective is to get Putin to capitulate. So now you have to pre-bunk the malinformation, which means destroy the reputation of the person spreading the information that's countering the official disinformation and misinformation. So
I can't work out why anybody's confused and why they're having trouble existing in the...
Stay in school, kids.
Now, while these two, Chris Williamson is exceedingly bright and Eric is overwhelmingly brilliant, while these two sharp minds find this all very amusing, for the average person, this is very, very dangerous stuff. And they don't understand it. And they probably can't even follow that this is a sarcastic moment of levity.
The point is, I've got all of these friends who are pre-bunked malinformers. That's
what a club. What a club to be in.
That's what I do. I'm a pre-bunked malinformant.
There's never been a sexier title, actually.
I spread malinformation.
Yeah.
And I need to be pre-bunked. So, of course, I'm going to be a grifter. I'm going to be, a charlatan. He's over. Can we stop trying to make Eric Weinstein a thing? Blah, blah, blah. And there's, giant farms of people and bots that are dedicated to spreading bad feelings about anybody who's going to contradict narrative.
Part and parcel of my work is trying to help people to separate themselves from dependence upon the system and to form small, intentional, cooperative, and interdependent communities. Now, I have to tell you that the success has been minimal. People, they bring their baggage from their previous life to their new ideas, and it's extremely self-destructive. So one of the things that I try to impart to people taking on this endeavor the community endeavor, is to let your life do the talking, not your mouth. Or as the George Fox, the founder of Quakerism, said, let your life so preach. All of this virtue signaling, do-gooder stuff, I've never met a single one who was genuine and productive. Not one. Let your life so preach. I was having a discussion recently with another church leader, if you will, and he pilloried me for using the term antinatalist. Well, there are a lot of terms that if you don't want to get censored on YouTube and the rest of the big tech platforms, that you better not use. And antinatalist so far isn't one of them. But we can tell a lot about a person by whether they're invested in the future or not. So when I meet someone who wants to worry about the planet and the environment and carbon, but he doesn't have any children and he's 40 years old, well, I know who I'm dealing with. I'm dealing with a child, a 40-year-old child who hasn't had the experience or the maturation process of parenthood and who hasn't gone through the lifelong marathon of raising children. When I listen to young to almost middle-aged feminists like Louise Perry or Mary Harrington, two very bright or reasonably bright and reasonably young people who each have a child, and a very young child, and are dispensing life advice as if they've completed the marathon. And I caution people, one of the problems with YouTube is that, well, we like to watch good-looking people, good-looking young people. But young and wise rarely go together. And old and good-looking or appealing to watch never go together. So I recognize that someone my age is not going to have the appeal of a beautiful young woman talking to you about her simple life, which the whole thing is a complete fabrication. It's much more appealing than listening to an old man tell you that you have to work very hard, save money, and be continually or consistently productive year after year to be a genuine member of a productive family and of an interdependent community. And that going to protests and involving yourself in political activism doesn't cut it. And I understand it's not appealing to the people who don't want to take the time to build a family and a community. They want to take the shortcut to appear good rather than to be good. It is my consistent observation that when you tell people who wish to live a simple life and be a member of a community that they're not really part of anything at all unless they are having or raising children, it's my consistent observation that such people, they go absolutely insane. How dare I? Well, as I've pointed out to all of the monthly meetings across the United States, if you look at the pictures, if you look at the people attending those meetings, they're all political activist types, mostly women, well past the age of childbearing, and all of them are liberal Democrats with their overarching concern are the Democratic Party's policies. And you can't build a community like that. You cannot build a community unless you have children, unless the children are raised in the ethos of the community and who are going to remain there and become good members and good citizens of that community. If they're going to run off to every political protest rather than build houses and barns and businesses and raise children and make sure you're there every night to do homework and drive your kids around to all of their activities, if that's not your life, you're not part of the community. And most young people, well, right up to old people in our society have been so atomized and so alienated that their entire life is built around resentment. The world is not perfect, and therefore I have every right to be enraged all the time. And trying to do anything when you're enraged, when you're judging everyone around you, especially when you haven't accomplished a damn thing, you haven't been able to produce a family, you haven't been able to provide for anyone but yourself, maybe you haven't been able to do that yet. Well, maybe you're not so hot. Maybe there's something wrong with your life, and maybe you could do something about it. What was it? I watched this fellow who said in the past, part of the Judeo-Christian tradition was that we recognized that we were deeply flawed people and that we should strive to do better. And well, that's gone. Now everyone is perfectly wonderful, and everyone else is appalling, and we should all be outraged.
The first thing that you might want to note about postmodernism is that it doesn't have a shred of gratitude. And there's something pathologically wrong with a person who doesn't have any gratitude, especially when they live in what so far is the best of all possible worlds. And so if you're not grateful, you're driven by resentment. And resentment is about the worst emotion that you can possibly experience apart from arrogance. Resentment, arrogance, and deceit. There's an evil triad for you. And if you're bitter about everything that's happening around you, despite the fact that you're bathed in wealth, then there's something absolutely wrong with you.
So people interested in building intentional, cooperative, and interdependent communities, they have some work to do. And what I advocate is that you think of it like as if you were going to Mars and it was a one-way ticket. Who would you bring to Mars? Would you bring people my age there? No. Would you bring couples that cannot or will not produce children? No. Would you bring unskilled or cognitively challenged people? No. Would you bring resentful, deceitful, and hateful people? Of course not. So you have to weed for all these things. It's inherently discriminatory. It's not, it's not diversity is our strength. No, diversity is not your strength when you are building an intentional community. If the people there do not adhere to the same system of values and the same expectations, one of the things that Quakerism preaches is that, yes, we're equal, but it's not the equality of the Democrats. It's equality before the Creator and before the community, in what the community expects from the individual and what the individual can expect from the community. We are equal, but we are not clones of one another. And so when you're starting out, you need to find the absolute best, most cooperative people with skills, with enthusiasm, with good conscience. Now, this is very, very hard to do because one of the things you have to do is strip away material competition. If you're going to be materially competitive, if you allow that in the community will absolutely implode. If people are competing over, look at my car, look at my house, look at my new engagement ring, he got me flowers, he went to Jared's, whatever it is, if that's the level of competition, your community is doomed. Now, what's that mean? Well, it has a very, very particular thing that has to be done, and that is, for the most part, you have to keep the people, especially your women, off of social media. Because that's where people savage each other. And women make 85% of the consumer decisions and post 85% of the pictures regarding engagement rings and roses and cars and whatever gifts they got. And if you're, what makes these Amish and Mennonite and Quaker communities work is everybody wears the same colored shirt. And they all live in white houses that all have the same architectural design. And they all drive black buggies. Now you might think that's extreme. Maybe it is, but it's why they are succeeding and everyone else is failing. Listen to what Sam Harris does a great job of stripping the bark off of it here.
That's the center of narrative and ethical gravity for these guys, right? I don't include Jordan there, but like Andrew Tate, Trump, there's like I've got a fucking Bugatti and you know you want one and I've got no apologies, right? I've got no fucks to give. I know you want to be like me, and if you're not good enough to be like me, I'll sleep with your girlfriend, right? Like that's the that's not an ethically wise person on any fucking level, even if he can string together a few sentences that seem actionable and useful.
Got it? That's the world we live in. And if you're trying to depart from that world and set up a new world of mutual cooperation and interdependence, you have to leave that mentality behind. Now, if you don't want to leave it behind, stay there and shred each other and compete with each other and grow old miserably. It's got nothing, you're on your own. But if you want this life, well, there are some sacrifices you're going to have to make. And perhaps buying a Bugatti, I don't even know what that is. It's a car from what I understand. Might be one of those. Well, that's enough for me today. Thank you. I'm Greg Jeffers for the American Quaker Friends Church. Please enjoy this short clip of my kids and our dogs bringing the sheep in for the evening the other day.